G'day. Let's just go back over the last 3 steps in the Masterclass, The Path for Self-Leadership. I apologize for wearing a hat out here in the sun, but as you can see, my nose has had a bit of a beating recently in the sun out running and swimming, so I have to be a little bit self-protective here. So let's talk about what we've gone over so far. Firstly, entering the stream, letting go of ignorance and poor motive, free from ego. Now, we know that there's a pyramid. You've seen that before. There's a got to love to. We know that people are motivated by got to in many of the 7 areas of their life. We know now that the lowest motive, so in other words, the most stressful area of our life, determines the consciousness or the motivation for the rest. So what we've agreed is there are 7 areas of life. There can be anger, greed, and hatred in any of the 7 areas of life. And as a result, we can be in a got-to space, let's say in our financials, and think we're in a love-to space in our health, relationship, or business. But really, the financial got-to drives the rest of the 7. And so although we may have the ego state or the fictional state that we're in a state of a fairly evolved operation at work or at home or spiritually in a yoga school, really the lowest of the 7 areas determines our overall consciousness. This compartmentalization idea, it works temporarily. So if we were a racing car driver, we may say, I'm going to compartmentalize my emotions for the next 1 hour. But for the other 23 hours, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, they will be vulnerable to their emotions. And so we are able, as a sports person, to compartmentalize. As a business person, we're able to compartmentalize. For example, when I'm asked to perform on stage and do a keynote speech, quite often there's a lot going on in the background for me. So I compartmentalize what's going on in the background. But if I was asked to do that keynote speech every single day of the week, the compartmentalization would start to leak. And that leakage means that the emotions we're having at home permeate into our work life. The emotions we're having at work permeate into our home life. The emotions we're having in our financial health or relationship permeate into our financial career and spiritual areas. So the idea of compartmentalization is brilliant. It's a fantastic concept. It's a great concept for the one-off keynote or the one-off Le Mans Grand Prix, provided that we've got a whole month to work out and remanage the rest of our life. If we try to compartmentalize our life every Saturday for a game of sport, it's possible that over a period of a year, that compartmentalization will start to fail. So we've talked really strongly about level of motive and what your motive is in self-leadership. This is number 1 fact that we must keep top of table. What is my motive? And I'm not talking about what is my dream, what is my vision, what is my goal. I'm talking about what is my state of mind. Where is my head at? Is it at a got to, should, need to, want to, choose to, or desire to, choose to, or love to space? And we need to be holistic. Total human awareness is the model. Total human awareness means that we are looking at ourselves not as just a compartmentalized human being, but all 7 areas come to amalgamate. There are walls between the 7 areas at an emotional, motivational area are permeable. And I think this is really important to recognize that we are not just compartmentalized human beings that go to work and can isolate ourselves. I'll turn this phone so it stops pinging me. So I think this exercise, number 1, culminates in what I call the emotional shower. And if you don't know how to do an emotional shower, look up my YouTube. Once again, I think I would recommend you do an emotional shower. If you don't know how to do one, please contact me. But I would recommend that you do an emotional shower on your health, on your relationship, on your social life, on your career, on your financials, on your spiritual and your mental life. You'll be quite shocked to find out what is normal and what is not. And you'll find probably that your reactions and actions in life are quite normal. if they're taken in a spreadsheet format, and you'll get to understand the idea of balance in your life. Step 2, awareness. Becoming aware of those things that support and challenge your truth. Mindful of body, we've talked about the effect of alcohol, the effect of drugs, the effect of coffee, the effect of continued stress on your body, and the fact that as you get older you realize that this is your greatest asset. You get to appreciate that the things you've done and not done to your body, the excesses and deficiencies that you've overdone it and overcooked your body, you've filled it full of carbohydrates, you've been addicted to sugars, or whatever it's been over the course of your life, you realize that that punishment that you've inflicted on your body does not rebound automatically. I went to India and studied yoga for 5 years, from the age of 34 to 40, or 6 years, trying to undo 20 years of stress on my body. And it took me 6 years, basically full time, of really strict regimes of diet and movement and yoga and breathing to try and undo what my body was heading towards the rubbish heap, and me with it. And because if your body's in pain, it's hard not to be. The other thing we talked about, mindful of feelings. There's a lot of people whose feelings are, let's say, considered to be an automatic part of life. And actually, we can generate feelings anytime we want. We can choose how to feel. And I think this is a power that we all need to take back in the concept of self-leadership, taking back the power of feelings, choosing how we feel. And I think personally, this is one of the greatest weaknesses I see in all human beings that I work with, that they're in a need-to state of mind, and that means that the need to means their feelings are being thrust upon them. They're not in an action, they're in a reaction, feeling reaction state of being. Mindful of mind means perception. How do you see the world? Do you see order in the chaos? And we use the laws of nature to try and give ourselves back control. Now, most people are led by polarized religious philosophy, and then wonder why their life is in a mess. Any polarization of philosophy will cause us to be as polarized as the philosophy, and so radical terrorism doesn't have to be allegiance to ISIS or one of these more ridiculous groups. It can be polarized. So I worked with a lady recently who was so angry because the world wasn't saving the whales, and the people were, Monsanto were injecting foods with all sorts of DNA adjustments, and she was a terrorist. And she was a fundamental terrorist, but in her opinion, in a justified righteousness. So we have to be careful that we don't subscribe to a philosophy that takes us out of our mind, gives us our power away. For another example is when a boss or a partner becomes blamed for how we think, how we feel. This is giving away our power, and I think mindful of mind is about taking back the power. And this is self-awareness. This is really powerful self-leadership, and we're only at step 2. And if we don't get this part right, we're not building a pyramid on a solid foundation, and that would be really unfortunate. You hear the beautiful sound of that bird. And last but not least, mindful of objects. I'm out here in my backyard. Now, I will fully acknowledge this is not the prettiest place in the world, with the fence and the builders next door and all sorts of things going on, and probably little bird poo around and spiders and ants. But I'm really mindful that this sort of work on self-leadership must be nature biased. You can't hope to be in a state of self-leadership and a state of self-awareness by isolating yourself in a room. One of the philosophies of Pascal is all humankind's problems come from dissociation with nature. And in another sense, what he's saying is the inability to sit quietly in a park under a tree by yourself is the cause of all human suffering. And the Buddha did the same thing, sat under a tree for 7 days and became enlightened. And Jesus went for 40 days into the mount, and Moses walked across the waters. And so you can see philosophically and anecdotally the idea of being out in nature is a really important part of being a great human being and having a great life. And I think there's too much of our time spent walking through nature or running past it and not celebrating it. We need to bring nature back into our lives. So mindful of objects, mindful of their creation, mindful of the energy that's gone in from them, but most importantly, mindful of the influence of nature in our children's lives, in our lives, in our grandparents' lives, and it's without doubt, and I have this, I can validate this by thousands of studies. Nature is the greatest therapy on earth. If you're trying to do therapy with your therapist or your coach or your counselor and you're in a room that's isolated from nature, the probability is what you're feeding is your ego, and your ego can be so easily fed and take you, instead of fixing you, take you in the direction of causing you more and more and more suffering. So this is step 2 of self-leadership, and a really important one. So the third step we've gone through, and we've done a video on this, is the effort. Now, I describe what most people do in life as stirring paint. Now, right next door, in the building next door, I can't turn the camera around, but the people are painting the walls, and they've spent quite a few weeks preparing those walls with sandblasters and scrapers and whatever, and then they've got these tins and tins of paint, and what they're doing is getting the paint onto the wall. Now, thinking is stirring the paint, and the paint has to be stirred. It's really important to stir the paint in the bucket, stir it around. But if we spend the whole of our life thinking about things and not focusing on an output, and not focusing on painting the wall, what we're doing, then our efforts will be all for naught. We'll be stressed, worried, have anxiety, reactive, nervous, intimidated, depressed, frustrated, disappointed, disillusioned, poor, unloving, unfriendly, unhealthy, everything, if we don't have effort focused on goodness. So I think this step 3 starts to take the asset that you've been given, this machine, this beautiful opportunity you have, and say, rather than think about it, I need to have a target point. I need to have an output. I need to have some filtration between me and the world so that I can actually release what I have and make sure I don't cause myself more problems. Life is so damn simple. I've mentioned her a few times, and unfortunately she becomes a little bit the topic of some of these podcasts and training things that I do. But my partner Lotta, all she's got to do is get up, take a poo, eat some food, go for a run, ride a bike, go for a swim, come home, have some food, fall asleep, wake up the next day and do it again. It's really simple. Out of all that, once in a while, she needs to get on an aeroplane, go and fly somewhere and do all that with other people in a competition. It's really simple. But if you could only know what goes on in the turbulence of her universe that creates something different to what I've just described. And if only we could just break it down and say, what do I have? What are the 4 most important things that I have to do today to lead me to success? So for me, it's read, write, travel, speak. There's 4. Read, write, travel, speak. And I ask myself every time I do something, am I reading, which is learning, writing, which is developing materials and getting things out to you, traveling, am I circulating in the world, and I don't have to do that totally physically with the holographic concepts of the internet and what we're doing right now, and speaking, which is what I'm doing. So my 4, if I'm doing that all day, every day, my self-worth is growing, my business is growing, I'm doing the right thing, I'm focused life on goodness. If, however, I start saying I have to read, write, travel, speak, please my partner, go for a bike ride, eat the right food, go to a shop, do the milk, make the laundry, if I have a complex array of things to do that are for my 4 priorities, then my 4 priorities get diluted, and in the end I don't know which God I serve. I don't know And so what happens, my life becomes extraordinarily complex, and I start creating problems for myself. And then I start solving those problems. And if I start solving problems that I created, I actually create a problem in the solution. The solution that I create to my problems becomes my next problem. And then the next problem I fix is the solution to that problem. So going back to Lotte and her triathlon, if she didn't worry so much about the event, then she wouldn't have to relax so much between her training. She would not have to concern herself with her dietary misadventures, because she wouldn't be so stressed. And so instead of solving the worry problem, why not just not worry? And so come back to focusing life on goodness. And I think unless you get this piece right, I would strongly advise you not to continue to the next step, step 4, success, where we will be working very, very intensely on creating the outcomes you want in your life, and an ordered, functional, healthy process. However, this must be built on the bottom 3 steps of self-leadership. Each one of these steps is a one-day corporate workshop that I run. As a group, it takes a whole day. To integrate the concepts of self-leadership one day at a time. And so I'd encourage you to conceptualize your own investment in this work, to say, am I spending 8 hours to get my effort focused on goodness? Am I being aware of my 4 top priorities? Am I conscious about what is low priority and what is high priority? Do I understand the 4 things that I have to do to cause me to go in the direction that my life will return my investment in it? Or am I diluted and fragmented into 1,000 things, and I don't know which is most and which is least important? Okay, this is Chris. You have a beautiful day. Bye for now.